In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. What is life? What is life? Do we know? We should. We're Orthodox Christians. We are about to partake of life in the Holy Eucharist, the body and blood of Christ. Do we know what life is? Do we know the things that are life and the things that are death? I talk about this all the time because it's really the critical question. What is life and what is death? Most of the world does not know the difference between life and death. They equate things that are death to be life, and things that are life to be death. We, who are Orthodox Christians, must learn what is life and what is death. We learn this, as I've told you so many times, and I'm attempting to do myself. I'm just speaking autobiographically when I tell you the things you need to do, because they're the things I need to do also, that we must learn by experience about Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is not something, nor the Holy Trinity, nor any dogma of the faith. It is not learned just by learning a fact about it or knowing something about it. It is learned by experiencing God. And we experience God as we become like God, because we were made in His image to become in His likeness. So as we become in His likeness, as that process is occurring, we are experiencing God to a fuller degree because we're more capable. Just like we see many children here. Some of them cannot speak yet. Some of them don't know arithmetic yet, etc., etc. But they will, as they grow older and have more capacity, be able to do those things. We are also children, and we are growing older, and we should have a greater capacity to know God in our heart. And if one knows God in his heart, nothing can be frightening to him. Now, frightening in terms of, are we afraid of pain? Are we afraid of things that might go wrong in life? Those things, those difficulties are because we're human, and because we get hungry or we get frightened of scary things. I'm not talking about that kind of fear. I'm talking about the kind of fear that makes a person consider something to be death, that is death to be life, and something that is life to be death. That kind of fear is a deadly fear, and we must be careful that we live in such a way that we never have that kind of fear. That kind of fear is everywhere now, including in Orthodox churches. That kind of fear, the fear of life instead of the fearing things that are life, considering them to be death, and fearing and considering things that are death to be life. The critical thing in our life, in everyone's life, whether they're a believer or not, is to know God, to become like God. That's all that matters. And in our age now, there's so much noise, even in the Orthodox churches, about things that are death and not life. The fear of physical death, but not really the knowledge that this fear can lead one to have spiritual death. Or perhaps you think I'm speaking in riddles. He who has ears to hear, he'll understand. You'll understand. And I think you'll understand more when we talk about the Maccabean Martyrs. They were yesterday. And I can't get them out of my head. If you listen carefully, you will see that I commemorate the Maccabean Martyrs every single time at the end of liturgy or other services, because they're absolutely inspiring. They're in, depending on how the book is ordered, 4 Maccabees. I think some books maybe it might be 2 Maccabees. I get all confused by all that numbering stuff. But I know that in my book, they're in 4 Maccabees in the Septuagint at the end. It's amazing. Eleazar, their priest, an old man, wise, respected, who showed that he understood what life is. And then the 7 brothers, and then their mother Salomonia, who urged them on, who prayed for them, who encouraged them to endure incredible tortures. Now, because of the audience, I won't describe the tortures, but I think that you should read this account very carefully. If you don't have a Septuagint, a book that has the Septuagint books in it, then you should get one And you should read, you can get it online easily, and you should read about the Maccabean Martyrs. And perhaps you, like I do, perhaps you should do a prostration to them every day. Because they knew what life is, and they were faced with physical death. Not just physical death, but terrible death. A torturous death. And they chose that death because they knew where life is. Life is in belief in God and fidelity to that belief. So let's go through their life. I copied out some of the scriptures that I wanted to talk to you about. But you should read everything. It's amazing. It's incredible. I don't know what we need Hollywood movies for when we have the scriptures and the description of the exploits of the saints. Before I go into this, I guess I have to tell you again, and I really mean it. I hope everybody takes this believes this and says, okay, no matter what other things Father Seraphim says when he goes on and on about stuff, I believe him here. Get the Lives of the Saints. Get a Manean, good one, and maybe spend a few pennies for it. I have one that cost about $200. And read it every day. Read it every day. And if you don't read it every day, then catch up. Just make sure you read all of the saints throughout the year. And then maybe find other Maneans. I'm not satisfied with the one I have only. I look at other ones as well. And be inspired by the exploits of the saints who knew what life is. We're getting a mixed message about life all the time. The world certainly is completely confused, and even there are voices in the church that are confused. But you'll know about life by living it, by living according to the lives of the saints, by emulating their virtue, their zeal. Not necessarily the exact things they did, but their state of mind. So this is what we should try to do with the Maccabean Martyrs. I've read this life now 2 or 3 times in the past couple days. It's incredibly exciting. I can't get enough of it. So what the situation was, Eleazar was one of the priests that actually was a translator of the Septuagint. So it's around that period of time. Maybe 300 BC? Could be somewhere around there, something like that. Maybe 200, 250, something. I'm not very good at all that historical dating stuff. But somewhere around that period of time. And so he was very old, in his 80s at least. And there was a king, Antiochus. And he was just a virulent pagan. And not only was he a pagan, but he just wanted to push people. He wanted to make people do according to his will. He didn't want live and let live. He wanted everybody to deal with things as he told them to. So as a pagan, he wanted to get the Jews to eat pork. And of course, pork is forbidden. In the Jewish law, pork is an unclean food. It's forbidden. It's not forbidden for us. We're not Jews. We're the New Jerusalem, really. But we're not subject to those laws, but they were. And they followed those laws to not eat pork. So he was trying to get the Jews to eat pork just to say he did, I think, really. I think that's all it was. It was just about bullying them. And so he says something to them that was really the beginning of my sermon today that made me think about it. Because I think about this every day. I hope you do. What is life? I hope you think about that every day. I hope you make the comparison between things all the time and say, is that life or death? If you don't, you're doing it wrong. You should be doing it all the time. So, the king says, I would counsel thee, old man, talking to Eleazar, before thy tortures begin, to taste the swine's flesh and save your life. They weren't talking about the same life, were they? Antiochus was thinking just of the physical life of Eleazar, who might live another 10 years or maybe 20, and who had lived a life that was in obedience to the law, with integrity, with the respect of his Jews, co-Jews, and everything else. And he wanted Eleazar to trade that life for the life of just a few more years of life. And even if Eleazar was 10 years old and had many years ahead of him, it's still just an instant compared to eternity. You have to make this comparison all the time. What is life? Antiochus wanted him to save his physical life. And he was going to torture him if he was not going to show him obedience in this way. So he goes on to tell him, it seems senseless not to enjoy that which is pleasant, yet not disgraceful, and from notions of sinfulness to reject the boons of nature. And you will be acting, I think, this is Antiochus speaking to Eleazar, still more senselessly if you follow vain conceits about the truth. If you're going to follow the truth, there are going to be people that say, you're crazy. The way of the cross is foolishness to the world. You might as well get that through your head. That's just true. And even within the church, we see, during this year and a half or so, that a way of piety is ridiculed by many in the church. So even those among your friends, perhaps, or those your acquaintances, they're saying, you're crazy for being so rigid about this, or for being so anti-scientific, or for being so hateful to your neighbor, and all these other things. This kind of dichotomy is always happening, and you have to be able to argue with it. Not argue with it in terms of saying, well, these are the reasons why I do these things, and the reasons why I don't do these other things. You can go ahead and do that if you want to. Perhaps somebody will be convinced. But what you must be able to argue against these things is you must know what life is and what death is, and the way of life and the way of death, and you must follow the way of life. You must be very sure of yourself. And that is only by living the Christian life. And I'm convinced that we as a people need to unite more and more in prayer. You need to pray more in your home, more than you've ever done. And we need to pray more here. We started doing that last night. We've actually increased our services very much, and we'll probably do it some more. But last night, there was a friend of mine who sent out a request. It's dormition according to the new calendar today. And so he sent out a request that everyone would do 300 prayers, Most Holy Theotokos save us, on Saturday. And I thought it was a very good idea. So there wasn't time Saturday afternoon. So after vigil, we're kind of making an exception, since really we're kind of in Sunday at that point. We got on our knees and we prayed Most Holy Theotokos 300 times with 3 icons of the Theotokos in the center of the church. I plan to continue doing things like that. And I would ask you to increase that kind of intensity in your home. You need to have that kind of intensity. The same old is not going to work anymore. There are great challenges that are ahead of Christians. They're coming. If you read the news, if anybody still reads the news, when you see the things that are happening in this day, there are more people like Antiochus who are saying, you must do this, and if you don't do this, you're crazy. And I'm going to force you to do this. That's happening. And it will happen more. And many Christians will capitulate. And they will develop an idea that you get along with secular things. We don't get along with secular things. Secular things are death. The secular life is death. Only the spiritual life is life. Now, we live in a secular world. We do things. We go to the grocery store. We go have jobs. We don't say that any of those things are not good to do. But the purpose of our life here is so that we are ready for the next life, so that we are united with God, so that we become shining in His likeness. And therefore, we understand why there are things that we don't do. For instance, we're fasting right now. We began the fast yesterday, which means we're not eating meat, we're not eating animal products, we're not eating fish even during the entire fast, including today and tomorrow. Olive oil and wine for basically almost the entire fast, except this Thursday, because we'll have Transfiguration. So the strictest fast of the year outside of Great Lent. And we are denying ourselves good food for a purpose, for life. Because we know by experience that when we deny ourselves food, that our heart opens up. There's a process where we become a little more intelligent, just a little more clear-headed, and God fills us with himself just a little bit more. It happens. So that's why we deny ourselves food. By no means is it strange, or what does he say? He says it's senseless to not enjoy that which is pleasant. We enjoy that which is pleasant when there is a time to enjoy it. But the things that, when there's not a time to enjoy it, when we have another priority, then we're happy to fast from certain foods. So we're in the midst of the fast. And I would tell you, perhaps some of you are good at fasting. Perhaps some of you haven't fasted before. Perhaps some of you really, tend to slip up in everything. Do what you're able to do, but try to do it better. Try to do better. Try to do better. That's the important thing. Try to do better. Don't make an excuse for yourself. If you don't fast, then just admit it. Don't say, well, that's what monks do or something. Those are words of death. Fasting is what Christians do for the sake of their soul, to be opened up to God. So, he then answers Antiochus. And he tells him, we live under a divine law and consider no compulsion to be so forcible as obedience to that law. There is a compulsion to obey the law of God, which is primarily to love your neighbor, to love God with all your heart and soul and mind, and of course your neighbor is yourself, and all things proceed from there. And there's a fidelity to things because of that law. So you can evaluate whether something's good or bad by whether or not it is in accordance with that law. So I guess I'll be specific. I've been kind of general. For instance, we've had, literally there is a bishop who says that if you are not willing to use multiple spoons in the liturgy to give communion, you're a spoon worshiper. He actually says that. He actually got away with that. I mean, I don't understand. They should have gone to his office and say, Anaxios, get out of here. How can you talk like that? How can you speak like that? We come to the mysteries begging God to fill us with life. So how can we come to the mysteries being full of fear and thinking that somehow a spoon will communicate disease to us? If you're going to get sick from the mysteries, it's because of your sins. It's not because of some pathogen that's on the spoon. I've been everywhere. I've been in prisons. I've been everywhere. I've communed people with tuberculosis, with AIDS, everything. And I'm not afraid. If I get sick, I'll get sick because of my sins. And the same thing for you. So we must be able to see which is a higher law. The higher law is to come to the mysteries without fear, or if you have fear, come anyway, right? Sort of marshal your forces and come. Courage, by the way, right, is not to be without fear. Courage is to act despite fear. So maybe you're a little afraid. Come anyway. That's what I tell you. Come anyway. Some people don't, okay? Some people have stayed away from church the entire time. I don't agree with that. I love those that have stayed away, but I don't agree with that because I think that's obeying a different law. A law that changes every day, depending on whatever talking head is saying. Everything changes, right? You follow the science. Well, if you follow the science, you're doing zigzags. But the way of life is not a zigzag. It's straight. It's a straight and it's a narrow way. So that's just one example. Perhaps I could come up with better examples if I thought hard enough. So we are obedient to the law. And he says, you deride our philosophy as though we live irrationally in it. But it instructs us in temperance, so we are superior to all pleasures and lust. It exercises us in manliness, so that we would cheerfully undergo every grievance. Now, of course, that's kind of archaic language, but basically he's saying, I have experienced life. I know what life is. You don't have any idea what life is. You're offering something to me that is death, but I know it's death. I know life because when I follow the law, there are things that happen in me. The feeling of temperance, the feeling of love, the feeling of humility, the purity in my soul, because I follow life. You have to experience this in order to be able to say no to things when they are offered to you with the appearance of life. It's going to happen. It's happening now. So, time just runs on. So let me go with one more thing that Eleazar said. Not talk about the sons, because there's just not enough time. So, Eleazar started to be tortured in ways that were... A normal person couldn't even dream up these things. He was tortured in horrible ways. An old man. But he bore it with great grace, without even groaning. But he was clearly tired. He was sweating and bloodied. And the soldiers took pity on him. So they basically said, "Why do you unreasonably destroy yourself with these things, Eleazar? We'll bring you some meat cooked by yourself. You can cook it yourself. And you can save yourself by pretending you have eaten swine's flesh." I've heard things like this, Okay, where there's probably going to be a vaccine mandate. You might not be able to travel anywhere in the country except probably Oklahoma, but that'll be it, right? You'll be able to stay in Texas and maybe Oklahoma, but you can't go to New York. You can't go to Los Angeles soon enough. Probably that'll happen if you don't have a vaccine passport. But you can get fake passports. You can get fake IDs, Now, it's one thing to have a fake ID when you're 14, I understand that. It's kind of a rite of passage, But we're not 14 anymore, okay? We're not 14 anymore. So I personally don't agree with that approach, okay? This is my personal opinion. We must be careful. We must listen to what Eleazar said about this, okay? So he said, "Let us, not us who are children of Abraham, be so evil advised as giving way to make use of an unbecoming pretense. For if it were irrational, if having lived up to old age in all truth, having scrupulously guarded our character, for it would be irrational, if having lived up to old age in all truth and having scrupulously guarded our character for it, we should now turn back, and ourselves should become a pattern of impiety to the young, as being an example of pollution eating. It would be disgraceful if we live on some short time and are scorned by men for cowardice, and to be condemned by the tyrant for unmanliness by not contending to the death of our divine, to the death for our divine law. Wherefore do you, O children of Abraham, die nobly for your religion." I'll tell you something honestly. I'll make you a confession to you. I get anxious about these times. I look at a lot of your faces right here, okay? There's a lot more than this, okay? Probably 150, 200 people that I interact with all the time. And I wonder how they're going to do as things get tighter and tighter, as the noose gets tighter. What are they going to do? Are they going to have their 12-year-old daughter vaccinated? Are they going to be vaccinated because otherwise they'll lose their job? Or perhaps some of that incredible rhetoric that is in companies, that they'll start to adopt it because otherwise they'll be fired? Using people's personal pronouns, whatever they are. I think it's interesting that many people choose as their personal pronoun when they're doing some sort of what they perceive to be a gender change. They want to be called them. Well, the Gadarenes, Gadarene demoniacs, they were them. They wouldn't even say how many there were. They were legion. I don't really think that we should ask people to say that we're legion. I just think it's a bad idea. So, we must live with fidelity to the faith. It's going to be hard. And my confession to you is this. I get anxious. And I wonder, am I going to be strong enough for you? Is there a time when I'm going to be pushed to some place and I'm going to give way in something? But I can't give way because you're depending on me to be strong. So Eleazar, he was already strong, stronger than I am. But he also would not pretend to eat beef instead of pork because he had people that depended on him. And you have people that depend on you. And that's a very strong incentive. When you have people that matter to you and you don't want to let them down. Your children, your wife, your husband, your friends, your flock, your parishioners, those that you pray together with. You don't want to let them down. And I don't want to let you down. But it is a daily struggle. No, I'm not really considering taking the jab. I mean, that's not a struggle. But it will be a struggle when I haven't taken it. Eventually, it's going to be a big struggle. Now, I don't happen to, have to go to a job where they give me a paycheck every day, okay? And I don't think you're going to require me to be vaccinated to continue to be your priest. But I understand that some of you are not in that position. And you're going to have to make tough decisions. And if you make a free decision, I won't gainsay it. If you make a decision to get vaccinated or something else, I'm not going to gainsay it. I'm not going to criticize you for it. I have my opinion. I've given it to you. You have your opinion. But what is important is that you don't give way to the way of the world, whether you get vaccinated or not. The way of the world is very unctuous. It's just that their words are smoother than oil, and yet they are darts. We can't give way to these things. Eleazar knew, I'm following the law. I'm not going to have any pretense. I'm not going to pretend to eat beef. I'm going to die for my faith because I have some boys that look up to me. And I'm not going to let them down. So you have people that look up to you. You have people that see your example. And you must not disappoint them. We must know what is life, what is death. That's really, I guess I could have had a sermon that was saying, what is life? And we could have saved 25 minutes. Huh? May God help you to know what is life. Please, increase your prayer. Increase your zeal. Start reading the lives of the saints or increase your reading of them. Get yourself ready for the challenges that are coming, because they're coming. If you know who you are inside, if you know Jesus Christ inside your heart, if you have experienced Him, then you won't be shaken. If you don't, then it's possible you could fall. So we got our work cut out for us. God bless you. God help you. Amen.